If you've followed Christian apologists, you've probably heard Christians and skeptics alike say how important it is to follow the evidence and that it's irrational to believe things without evidence. So Christians give their evidence and defend it while skeptics try to tear it all down. But behind all this is a problem for Christians. As much as we like to defend our views by offering evidence for Christianity, most Christians around the world have never heard arguments for Christianity. They could never tell you the cosmological argument for God or the minimal facts approach to the resurrection of Jesus. Most Christians in Asia, Africa, and many in the West don't even know that such arguments exist. So here's the problem. Are they being irrational? Are these Christians justified in believing that Christianity is true? My evidentialist instincts want to say no. But if that's the case, and if we care anything about intellectual virtue, we would have to encourage these Christians without evidence to stop believing, at least until they learn the evidence for Christianity. And to make things even more difficult for us, we can't, in good conscience, lead people to faith unless they can first demonstrate good evidence for Christianity. My instincts don't like that either. There's been a really interesting conversation when it comes to Christian knowledge, which tries to show that Christians can be warranted in their Christian beliefs without having apologetics or evidence for Christianity. All the while, this approach claims to avoid endorsing blind faith. It's quite clever and worth exploring. Does it work? I think mostly. You'll see what I mean soon. In recent times, a new approach to apologetics has risen, known as the Reformed Epistemology approach. This approach was developed and championed by the Christian philosopher Alvin Plantinga. If you don't know, Plantinga is one of the few key pioneers of contemporary Christian philosophy, which thrives today because of him and a few others. He's done some critical work discussing the logical problem of evil, the modal ontological argument defending S5 logic. And the guy knows just about everything except how to fix an AC unit, according to a West Michigan local news outlet. Anyway, Plantinga has this 3-volume work on warranted belief and a highly condensed version called Knowledge and Christian Belief. In this work, Plantinga presents his Reformed Epistemology approach, which tries to show that believers can be totally justified and warranted in their Christian beliefs, even if they have no evidence of Christian apologetics. It does more than that, but that's what we're working at today. Here's a quick and dirty summary of Plantinga's thinking. The first thing to recognize is that not all beliefs require evidence. If that were true, then we would never believe anything because all of our beliefs about evidence would need evidence, and that evidence would need evidence, and we would never get anywhere. So we believe some things without evidence, and we are fine in doing so. None of us demand evidence for the belief that 2 + 2 = 4, or that a square has 4 sides, or that you feel a certain way, or that you perceive a tree in front of you. These are called properly basic beliefs. Most epistemologists who talk this way say there are 2 ways a belief can be properly basic. Either it's a self-evident belief or it's incorrigible. That is, it's not the kind of belief that could be corrected. Here's where Plantinga starts to carve his own path. He says, why only these 2? To say these are the only 2 things for properly basic beliefs is a belief that isn't self-evident or incorrigible, and it can't be defended. We just believe these are the 2 things for a properly basic belief. We also just believe things like the world was not created 5 minutes ago with fake memories of a past life put inside us. So he says, let's expand what we can count as a properly basic belief. Now, you might know where Plantinga is going with this. He wants to argue that Christian belief can count as a properly basic belief. It's one of those things that you just believe and you're rational for believing even without evidence. No, he's not a presuppositionalist, so how on earth does he defend this view? Well, after doing a fair deal of philosophical work, Plantinga develops a new way of understanding what makes a belief warranted. Rather than evidence itself making a belief warranted, he says that warranted belief is actually related to how your mental life operates. I'll give you his definition of warranted belief, and then I'll simplify it. Here's what he says. A belief has warrant for a person S only if that belief is produced in S by cognitive faculties functioning properly, subject to no dysfunction, in a cognitive environment that is appropriate for S's kind of cognitive faculties according to a design plan that is successfully aimed at truth. Welcome to the world of philosophy. Here's the simple version. A belief is good to have if you got that belief because your mind was working correctly in forming true beliefs. I know I didn't capture all of his nuance, but let's just go with that. Thinking about this analysis that Plantinga gives, it seems to make sense, doesn't it? Now, here's where it all comes together. Plantinga says, look, if Christianity is true, then God made us to believe in him. He gave us what John Calvin calls a sensus divinitatis, or a sense of divinity. God also gives his Holy Spirit, who reveals Christian truth to us. So if Christianity is true, then our minds were made to just know that Christianity is true. The design plan of our mental life, it was made to handle Christian beliefs as properly basic. Evidence for Christianity doesn't hurt anything, but if people believe in Christianity without knowing any evidence for it, that is a perfectly rational, warranted, and justified belief because it's precisely what our mental life was for. It's working according to its God-given design in forming true beliefs. To use Plantinga's technical language, he says, the Christian beliefs in question will have warrant. They will be produced by cognitive processes functioning properly in an appropriate environment according to a design plan successfully aimed at the production of true belief. Notice the big if. If Christianity is true, then God made our minds in such and such a way, and we are warranted in believing Christianity without evidence. Plantinga isn't saying merely that Christian belief without evidence is fine. He's saying it's fine if Christianity is, in fact, true. This pushes the conversation to where I think it belongs. Is Christianity true? How do we figure out if Christianity is true? Well, I would say we do that by looking at the evidence for and against Christianity. Overall, I think Plantinga's work is helpful. There are some maneuvers that he makes in the world of epistemology that people debate, but his general argument is nice in showing that we can do our apologetics and we can show that Christianity is true. Having shown that, we can conclude that people who believe in Christianity without knowing the evidence we just shared are actually justified in believing. We don't need to encourage them to stop believing because they have no evidence. What I would add to Plantinga, however, is that we should still help our Christian brothers and sisters know the evidence for Christianity. I don't recall him saying that anywhere. Maybe I missed it. Maybe it's just not part of his project. But giving evidence is part of what it means to build one another up in a rock-solid Christian faith and conviction. Our minds may be working correctly when we accept God, even without knowing good reasons for the faith, but I'm not convinced they were meant to stay there. 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. That's part of being a disciple of Christ. And sometimes the person asking is ourself. This is why I have a ton of other videos on my channel, why we can believe Christianity is true. A good place to start would be my series on the reliability of the Gospels or something I've done on the resurrection. I'll pin a comment with some links. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.